Now, after having done videos for the first two movies in the sequel trilogy to celebrate the anniversary of their releases, I kind of felt obligated to complete the trilogy, to finish what I started, and to rewatch and talk about The Rise of Skywalker. And in its case, it's now the 5th anniversary of its release, or will be on December 20th to be technical. Which is kind of crazy to think that it's been 5 years since that film came out, that Star Wars, on the film front anyway, has been on a 5-year break that is still going and will last another year and a half at the very least. Until May of 2026 when the Mandalorian and Grogu movie almost certainly comes out. And I say almost certainly because, well, it is done filming and is in post-production, but the way things have been going for Lucasfilm with movies the last few years, how many have been announced and canceled or just never talked about again, I don't know that I'll believe it's coming out till I actually sit down in a theater and start watching it. Either way, and speaking about how long it's been since we got a Star Wars movie, it's kind of funny, or maybe just sad, to think that if the sequel trilogy had been fantastic, the demand for more Star Wars movies after it, immediately after it, absolutely would have been met, even with, all the problems Lucasfilm has been having getting movies made lately. We would have, for better or worse, I suppose, we would have gotten at least a few more Star Wars movies over these last few years. They would have made them happen one way or another. And maybe, relatively speaking, we would have had a whole lot of them if the sequels had again been loved by nearly all corners of the fandom and the general audience. It's kind of crazy to think that there may have been perhaps a half dozen other Star Wars movies in existence right now if they hadn't screwed up the sequels. If The Rise of Skywalker had been the culmination of something carefully planned out and brilliant on the whole, something that could in some way have and should have, given the love for and popularity of Star Wars, but something that should have been a rival to Avengers, Infinity War, and Endgame, which were essentially coming out at the same time as the sequels, and did far, far better than them at the box office. But alas, that was not the case. The Rise of Skywalker was a movie that, I guess, tried to make do with the little bit it had to work with from the previous film. A film that didn't really leave us with a truly legitimate villain after Snoke was cut in half and Kylo was rejected by Rey and left looking like a fool in the end by Luke Skywalker. Also, Rey herself was left in a position where, well, let's just say it felt like no problem was too big or too small for her, that nothing could ever slow her down, much less stop her. And so maybe it should be no surprise that J.J. Abrams managed to somehow make the worst film in the sequel trilogy, something that in many ways, though not all, was arguably just a worse movie in general than the other two. With its crazy fast plot that really made little to no sense when looked at with any level of scrutiny whatsoever. Things just happen in this movie and they happen so fast in the hopes that you never get a chance to ask why they're happening or how. Like how Palpatine returns, which, as the movie even tells us, just happens somehow, don't worry about it. There was some dark science or the Sith did some stuff.
Emperor is dead. Dark science. Cloning. Secrets only the Sith knew.
Whatever it is, he's just back and he decided to announce his return instead of sneak attacking and gave the Resistance like a day to be able to stop him, or he's going to launch a bunch of Death Star destroyers across the galaxy and take over. Or take over even more so, I guess, given the First Order, which is under his control it seems, is controlling the galaxy at this point and is only contested, as far as we know, by the Resistance, which has grown just a little bit in strength over the last year in story, or since we saw them a dozen strong in the Millennium Falcon at the end of The Last Jedi. But yeah, if Palpatine just attacks without the announcement, I'm pretty sure he just wins. I guess his overconfidence got the best of him yet again. Or maybe he lost because the secret fleet of Death Star destroyers he had made, they didn't seem to know which way up was without being directed. And yeah, that is kind of the crux of the whole last battle. The Resistance is trying to destroy a relay station or satellite dish, essentially, that tells all the Star Destroyers which way to fly. However, even with all the problems the film has, or how dumb some of it is, and I'm just scratching the surface here, a lot of them I forgot all about until watching it again, Anyway, even though this is a really, really bad movie, I, oddly enough, still find some level of enjoyment in it. I don't know, maybe it's because I just don't really care anymore at this point in the trilogy, and that it is just a stupid, fun adventure that if you turn your brain completely off, can be enjoyed or has some decent moments in isolation or cool looking scenes to behold. It also has, in my opinion, the best scene in the entire trilogy, that being the one between imaginary Han Solo or Leia projecting herself as Han across the galaxy, I think, maybe. But it's Han in some form talking to Kylo Ren or talking to Ben Solo. And if you don't worry about what is actually happening or how, if you just take it for what it is, it's actually a very well done and emotional scene that works for what it is. Other than that, though, and again, a few other little things here and there, if I had to describe the rest of the movie using just one word, that word would be ridiculous. The film is, in many different respects, just all over the place, and again, has some of the dumbest sequences when you really think about how, again, ridiculous they are in all of Star Wars. Even the Holdo maneuver has nothing on how dumb a light speed skipping is, or maybe I should say how it's presented in the film, because in theory it should work. It should certainly be possible to make small, frequent jumps with a hyperdrive. And yeah, I could see that being something a hyperdrive wouldn't necessarily like or would burn it out, perhaps. The problem with it, though, is that each jump they make or made in the film, which really should be kind of completely random, right? That was kind of the point of light speed skipping. You're just kind of randomly jumping and jumping. But they somehow manage to come out by something each and every time, and sometimes like right by or right on top of something or in the atmosphere of something. And the odds of that of always coming out of hyperspace right by something if you're doing it randomly, and more importantly, not crashing into any of this stuff. But it all seems pretty astronomical. And yeah, don't get me wrong, it's a fun sequence that doesn't have huge ramifications for the rest of Star Wars, not like the Holdo maneuver kind of did, where now we have to wonder why that is the first time we've ever seen anything like it done, even though, yes, this movie does try to explain it as a 1 in a million chance. But light speed skipping just showed that style or spectacle was definitely the priority here over substance or any of this making any real sense. And don't get me wrong here, the George Lucas films also have things where form or style or spectacle are prioritized over making sense or being scientifically accurate, let's say. For example, Lucas wanted his space battles to have a World War II feel about them. And it's cool and works, and no one complains that maybe aspects of it don't really make complete sense if you were trying to look at what real space battle might be like. And so, no, the Lucasfilms do not go out of their way to beholden themselves to the laws of physics or astrophysics. They're treated more like guidelines. But nothing in those films in the Lucasfilms is anywhere close to as ridiculous as light speed skipping, or again, how it is presented here. And speaking of light speed or hyperspace, it is crazy how fast they seem to get around the galaxy in this film, keeping in mind they have like 1 day to stop Palpatine and to go to all these different planets.
In 16 hours, attacks on all free worlds begin.
And also to gather up a massive fleet and to go to an otherwise unreachable part of the galaxy, one where you need a wayfinder, and I'm not even going to get into that, how silly those things are, or finding them was. But they do some really crazy galaxy hopping in this film, again going to multiple different planets across it, and again in less than a day, and reminds us that when it comes to hyperspace or light speed in Star Wars, how long it takes and how fast it is, well, it takes precisely as long as the plot requires it to. All that said, one thing I will give the film credit for is that it tried to do something with Rey. It tried to give her something akin to a flaw when it gave her a sort of identity crisis by learning she was a Palpatine and what that might mean. And sure, it only lasted like 10 minutes and she got over it with a pep talk from Luke, which I'm okay with. I also appreciated the attempt to give us the Luke we all thought we were going to get in the previous film, and I still like his line that,
"Confronting fear is the destiny of a Jedi."
it is the best line in the trilogy in terms of what it means to be a Jedi, and is better than the stupid stuff he said in the previous film about Jedi.
The legacy of the Jedi is failure.
But anyway, I did like Luke in this, and I did think there was, again, an attempt with Rey to do something, albeit a pretty weak one, or a weak one given how much time you had to really do anything in this film. Though I thought by and large the character interactions between our main characters, Finn, Poe, and Rey, they worked and were kind of the highlight. While watching this again, I bought into them being friends or having become friends and truly caring about each other. Even if the last film split them all apart, and, well, we hadn't at all actually seen Poe and Rey together before this. In fact, they first meet at the end of The Last Jedi.
Hi,
Hi,
I'm Poe.
Ray.
I know.
Even though they also meet at the end of The Force Awakens, or you would assume they did given they're in the same place at the very same time. And so yeah, I don't know that, after watching it again, that there's a whole lot to really say about this movie, and I don't know if that is a good thing, or a bad thing, or just a bit of both. It's probably a bit of both. Like I said, the one word I would use to describe this movie is just ridiculous. I could probably make an hour-long video going into how dumb so much of it is, and certainly I've made videos in the past about those problems, how the film kind of insults your intelligence, and why it is best to just turn your brain off if you want to try to enjoy it. But honestly, I just don't really care to go into all of it again. I watched this movie and the whole trilogy again with mostly a sad feeling in my heart. I kept asking myself what could have been if only from the very start, from day one, there had actually been an attempt and ultimately success to put a plan in place for the trilogy, one set forth by someone or someones who wanted to honor Star Wars above all else, to fit neatly in with the first two chapters of the Skywalker saga, if you want to call it that, with the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy, instead of two people, Rian Johnson and J.J. Abrams, who not only weren't on the same page, but often didn't feel like they were even in the same galaxy. Well, that's all I got for you this time. Now it is your turn to take to the comments below and tell me what you think about The Rise of Skywalker, where would you rank it among the sequel films, or what's the one word you would use to describe it? Whatever the case may be, leave a comment below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.